Hello, namaste, and a very good evening to all. And most importantly, a very happy International Women's Week to all, throughout Women's Week to all. The week is not sufficient to honor the pride of womanhood. We shall make do with today. I am Shrija Singh, the team leader of Project Kahaanikhoj, and I welcome you all today to today's event. Our anchors for today are Ishita and Mahima. I'll hand it over to them.
Thank you, Shrija. Good evening, everyone. I am Mahima, and now I would like to tell you about our organization. SarkariSchool.in is an initiative of the We Citizens Foundation and is devoted to create a bright future for the students in India, especially the marginalized majority, by unitedly working with eager individuals of the country in the education field, working towards the same goal. We give recognition to real-life heroes who, despite the hardships and limited resources, continue to do their job with absolute grit and courage. Now I would like to tell you about our two projects, Project Kahaanikosh. Project Kahaanikosh basically work on educational stories. We upload stories as text, audio, or video format for supplementing learning beyond the classroom teaching. Our aim is to reinstate the old tradition of oral storytelling. Our project is working on moral education and we are working on children's literature. Project Kahaanikhoj aims to build a platform where the government school students aged between 4 to 14 years would be introduced to contemporary Indian children literature to induce positive behavioral change in children by inculcating moral values, critical thinking, rational and problem-solving skills. The project also invites writers who can develop stories for children and help in building a repository of children's literature. And we are here in collaboration to save the Women's Week by discussing the roles of women in our Indian literature. Uh, Indian mythology literature has given many female characters, but sadly, they were marginalized. Their roles were limited to wives, daughters, and mothers. Now the question is why? Why are there stereotypes? On Women's Day, Team Kahani Khoj and Kahani Kosh welcome you to be a part of this interesting and unique event. Now, I would like to call our first speaker, Ms. Priyal Navlani.
Hello. So before I start speaking, can I request you to share the presentation that I had sent? That would be great if possible.
Just a minute, I'm going.
Thank you so much. So as as already told and discussed that we'll be talking about female characters in Mahabharata. So before talking about this topic, I would like to bring your attention to how Mahabharata is actually portrayed and told to us individuals. I was first introduced to Mahabharata when I was 14 or 15 years of age. I've never read the Mahabharata as an entire text or got information regarding it, but I was introduced to it by my parents or grandparents in forms of stories and watching the Mahabharata that aired on Star Plus back then. I mean, all of us know how famous it was because while I was searching for pictures for this presentation, all I could get the actors portraying those characters and not some image or picture of or some other image or picture. Can we move on to the next slide? So, when I was first introduced to Mahabharata, I was introduced to this text in a more patriarchal way, as I said, because for me, Mahabharata was only 18 days war where Kauravas and Pandavas fought. Lord Krishna played a very major role, and Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and these characters' tales were told. The women characters, as said, were marginalized or sidelined. Their tales were not discussed in that detail. Now, with age growing up and when you start using your brains, I started to search and understand the women characters, realizing that they have a lot more character traits attached to themselves instead of motherhood or being a great wife. They're not just characters related to being mothers, wives, and daughters, but there are other character traits as well, which can only be understood if we try to understand their tales in a separate manner or individually. So, before talking about the impact of the women characters in Mahabharata on individuals and what character traits do they possess, I would like to give you a brief of all the women characters of most of the women characters, if I can, about their tales and the character trait, and focus on their other character traits instead of being a mother and wife. Can we move on to the next slide? So, role of female characters mainly goes unnoticed, like as I've put there, that how important was their role in the epic, what characteristics do they possess, do they contribute to the war, and their impact on young readers. No one has mainly focused on these topics because we've only read the epic as a story, which is male centric and where war happens and good wins over bad in a way. But these female characters played a very, very major role. Now, what is their role? I'll be focusing on that aspect and what character traits do they have and what do they teach us. So there are a few prominent characters which everyone is aware of, like Gandhari, Kunti, Draupadi, and maybe Satyavati as well. And there are few not so prominent characters like Ganga, Subhadra, Ulyapi, Hidimbi, Uttara, Amba, Shikhandi, Damayanti. I'll be focusing on few of these characters and telling you their stories so that we can associate them with their tales, with their character traits, I'm sorry, and then focus and move ahead with what impact do they have. Next slide, please. Firstly, talking about Satyavati. Satyavati, also known as Matsyagandha or Gandhavati. Now, Satyavati was the daughter of the head of fishermen. Why did she get the name of Matsyagandha? Because she smelled like fish or fish like smell. What about the name Gandhavati? Name Gandhavati means a beautiful musky fragrance. Now, Satyavati was really beautiful, smart, and intelligent. When Satyavati was told to do a favor by sage Parashar, she insisted that I'll only do that if you fulfill my three wishes. And one of these wishes was to have that musky, beautiful fragrance forever. So that's why her name switched to Gandhavati. And now put the idea of putting forward three wishes before doing a favor for the sage imparts her intelligence because at that point of time, even men could not say no to a sage or rishi if they asked for a favor because they could get angry. But Satyavati's intelligence is seen, her boldness is seen when she does that. So not only the trait of motherhood is or being a wife to Shantanu is associated with her, but the trait of intelligence and boldness is associated too. Moving on, we can talk about Satyavati's trait of ambitiousness. Satyavati was an ambitious woman because when King Shantanu asked her to marry him, she put forward her condition that I'll only marry if the son from my bloodline or lineage turns out to be the king, not your already existing son Bhishma. This is the only reason Bhishma took the pledge that he would remain unmarried for his entire life. Again, showing ambitiousness and determination of getting what she wants. And that's how her wish of continuing the lineage and always having an heir to throne results in she getting married her son to Ambika and Ambalika. And then when her son dies, she somehow convincing her other son Vyas to give kids to Ambika and Ambalika, Dhritarashtra and Pandu respectively. She decides to go and retire in the forest life. That's the fourth stage of life as described in Hindu mythology. After she realized that okay, there's always an heir to the throne after her purpose, after her wishes were fulfilled. So, as I said, Satyavati's character traits instead except motherhood and a wife involved ambitiousness, intelligence, and determination, and fulfilling her purpose. Can we move on to the next slide? Now I'll talk about Gandhari. Gandhari was Gandhari is mainly known as the woman who blindfolded herself for her blind husband, Dhritarashtra. Now, there's something more to Gandhari as well. She could foresee the future. She could understand the political needs. She was intelligent enough to understand the political needs and the political affairs that took place during that point of time. She understood that her father had agreed to the marriage proposal brought by Bhishma just because of increasing administrative power and political issues. She understood this and accepted her father's proposal as a dutiful daughter. However, I personally think that her idea of blindfolding herself is also a way to show retaliation against the fact that you put your political needs over your daughter and her wishes. And that's the reason I'm blindfolding myself. That's because of your decision and treating me as secondary that you're seeing this. And even we can consider her idea of blindfolding herself as the a way to avoid the political situations that arise in a kingdom which she was well aware of because her marriage was a result of the political strategies by the kings. Now, Gandhari is even known as the mother of 100 sons and one daughter. She is seen as an intelligent mother who knows righteousness, who knew what is morality, who knew what is right and wrong, because she always tried to stop her son Duryodhan when he committed some evil deeds. She even stops her husband Dhritarashtra when he continuously supports Duryodhan in all his and by fulfilling all his evil wishes. She warns him that the result is not going to be good. That shows her foresightedness for the future. Gandhari's motherhood comes into action or play when she knew that Duryodhan would die and all her sons would die in the battle, but she still removes her blindfold and takes a look at Duryodhan's body so that nobody can harm him. Her idea of war and ethics comes into play when she gets angry at Bhim for hitting Duryodhan on his thigh because she knew that was against the rules of the war. That shows how intelligent she was and how well aware she was of the situation around. She was not only limited to cooking or just doing what her husband said. Gandhari even portrayed anger when she cursed Krishna for for allowing the war to take place because she knew that Krishna could have stopped war if he wanted. Moving on to Kunti, can we move on to the next slide? So Kunti, the mother of 5 sons and the wife of Pandu, before talking about Kunti, I like to bring the character trait of impartiality into focus. The way Kunti treats her stepsons Nakul and Sahadev tells a lot about her. She treats them equally to her actual sons, Bhim, Arjun, and Yudhishthir. After Nakul and Sahadev's mom, Madri, leaves the responsibility of them to Kunti when she commits sati, blaming herself responsible for Pandu's death. Kunti's intelligence and her duty, her morality, this is also seen when she takes care of the 5 Pandavas, all alone as a single mother with no father figure over them. She teaches them what is right, what is wrong. She teaches them behavior. She teaches them the ground level of growth. Next, when we talk about Kunti, this thing mainly goes unnoticed. That is that Kunti knew when to fight for injustice and when not to. She was aware of the fact that if injustice has happened, you can ignore it for a certain time, but when required, you need to speak up, you need to stand up against it. For instance, I'll just quote the example that after Draupadi's humiliation, Kunti was aware that only way to get all these injustice, to nullify all the injustice done is war. She was aware that the war would cause a lot of pain, a lot of deaths, and there would be no good end. But she still supported war because she knew there's no other solution. That tells how practical she was. Further, she even felt bad for Gandhari, her sister-in-law, or Dhritarashtra, brother-in-law, because she was aware that they'll be losing their sons. But that shows how she puts nullifying injustice and truth over emotions, which is not which we do not understand when we read the Mahabharata or see Mahabharata aired on television like that, because this aspect is not brought into focus. Can you move next slide, please? Uh, Draupadi or Panchali or Yajnaseni, she's one of the most prominent characters and the central female character in the epic Mahabharata. So Draupadi is born out of the sacrificial fire that her father Drupad had done to get a son to kill Drona. So she is also known as Yajnaseni for that reason. Now Draupadi being the most beautiful woman in the country, she was bold, she was fierce, she was fearless. She never feared from saying the truth and asking questions, which was considered a negative trait for women at that point of time, at least. When Draupadi was humiliated in the entire courtroom, she dared to ask the question and question her humiliation. She knew that her humiliation was wrong and against the morality. She knew what is dharma, she knew what was right and wrong. She questioned her husbands, she questioned kings, she questioned all the other members mentioned there in the courtroom. That shows how fierce and bold Draupadi was. She wasn't scared of stating the truth. Draupadi was even not self-centered. She knew that she knew that she had to put truth over her emotions and self and over herself, because when she was aware of the fact that her five her all the sons, five sons, each with one Pandav and Abhimanyu, they all will die in the war. She still decided that the war should take place. She was the first person who got to know of this fate. Now, this fact that she chose the war to happen was that she wanted to give them a lesson that a female's humiliation can result to such devastating ends, and you shouldn't do that. Because if she would have chosen that, okay, I don't want war to happen, I'll ask for forgiveness, I'll forgive them, and we can just live somewhere else. I don't want to lose my sons. I don't want to lose six of my sons. Then the injustice and those things they might would have continued at that point of time. But at that point of time, it was told, ki, okay, humiliation of a women, if you do that, then you're going to suffer fate as bad as Kauravas and as bad as Hastinapur suffered. Moving on, Draupadi even had few negative traits associated with her. She is considered to be egocentric. She's considered to be a bit angry. She had anger issues. The reason I'm talking about egocentric is when she insulted Karn based on his caste while he was trying at her Swayamvar for Duryodhan that I won't marry Karn because he's of a lower caste. That shows that she considered caste and race above everything else, which is a negative trait. Now, her anger is seen in the Indraprasth courtroom when Yudhishthira was being crowned as king, that she decided the punishment for Duryodhan, Dushasana, and Karn, that was to take away their weapons, which is a very harsh punishment for a warrior. And that was because she was always angry from Duryodhan and the way he behaved with his I'm sorry, the way he behaved with his brothers, that was the Pandavas. So Draupadi is not portrayed as a perfect female character. She's portrayed with negative traits, and that makes her more relatable and to the young readers, I believe. Because portraying someone with perfection makes that person or that character very unrealistic, and it's not possible to understand that character so well. Unlike Draupadi, if you try to read her tale in detail, you'll realize that how easy it is to relate to her, how easy it is to relate to her decisions, the decisions she made, because it's her character traits are full of imperfection and perfection. They're wrong characters and the right character traits as well. Can we move on to the next slide? Now, this was about few of the prominent female characters in Mahabharata. When we talk about the not so prominent female characters, the first character that comes to my mind is Ganga, the first wife of King Shantanu, mother of Bhishma. Now, Ganga was way ahead of her time. She was the first woman to put three conditions before marriage. She was the one to set her priorities straight. She was like, okay, I want this, then only I'll marry you. If you do not do what I've said, I'm not going to marry you. I don't care. And as Shantanu broke his promise and he questioned Ganga when Ganga was going to throw Bhishma in water, she said that, okay, you broke your promise. I had made my priorities straight. I leave you now, but I promise you that I'll return Bhishma to you after giving him enough knowledge. So Ganga was way ahead of time. She knew how to keep her priorities straight. Her intelligence is even shown when she takes care of Bhishma and grooms him to be a perfect man who understands morality and everything all alone as a single mother. She kept her promise by returning Bhishma to Shantanu. Her motherhood is also shown when Bhishma is on his deathbed and she goes to Bhishma and tells him to and goes to Bhishma and tells him to calm down and stays with him so that he can get some relief. Or when she curses Amba when Amba is praying for Bhishma's death and when Amba wants to seek revenge from Bhishma. So here we see the motherhood character of Ganga. Can we move to the next slide, please? Subhadra. Subhadra, sister of Krishna, second wife of Arjun, mother of Abhimanyu. That is how she's mainly talked about. She's one of the most ignored characters, I believe, and her character is only displayed as a very meek and modest woman who didn't say much, calm, poised, in such a manner. But Subhadra, I believe, is way more than that. Yes, she was meek and modest, and she did not have as many bold character traits as Draupadi had. She was not that fierce. She did not question back like Draupadi. But the most important character trait that I believe Subhadra has is that she was strong. When Abhimanyu died, she was strong enough to handle her daughter-in-law Uttara, who wanted to commit sati. That you have to stay alive. You have Abhimanyu's kid in your womb. She was strong enough to handle herself. Keeping in mind, Subhadra was not aware that Abhimanyu would die in the war. It was Draupadi only who knew this fact. So staying strong at that moment when your son dies at that young age, it's not easy for everyone. And next, Subhadra, the best part of Subhadra's trait is that she broke practices. She broke the practices that were done at that point of time. Subhadra decided not to go and live in exile in forest as the last stage of life with Pandavas and Draupadi. The practice that was very common that Satyavati did, Kunti did, Gandhari did, Draupadi, everyone kept on doing that. But Subhadra said, no, I am going to stay in the empire with my grandson Parikshit. I am going to guide them, which was very rare even for men to do at that point of time. It was fixed that, okay, your last stage of life, you're happy, you're satisfied, you go in the forest, meditate, and die over there. But she said no, she was like, okay, I don't want to do this. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to stay in the empire. I'm going to stay with my kids, which was uncommon at that point of time. So Subhadra's character is not only a woman who was meek, modest, and calm, but a very strong woman who broke practices, who knew what she wanted for herself and behaved in that certain way. Can we move on to the next slide? Amba or Shikhandi. So the reason I'm bringing Amba and Shikhandi together is that Amba was reincarnated or reborn as Shikhandi. Amba's tale, the elder sister of Ambika and Ambalika, whose Swayamvar was destroyed by Bhishma because when he came over and won all the three sisters, he did not realize that Amba was in love with some other prince. Bhishma did allow her to go and marry that prince, but that prince rejected Amba. He's like, no, since Bhishma has won you, I'm not going to marry you. So Amba's love remains incomplete. And then she goes to Bhishma, since you've won me, I'm not going to marry Satyavati's son, but I'll only marry you. And Bhishma could not do that because of his pledge. Now here Amba becomes angry and she prioritizes herself, her love, which I don't think is wrong, because if Bhishma would have at that point of time understood before making this decision or follow the rules of Swayamvar instead of just entering over there and challenging all the princes, because everyone knew nobody's as powerful as Bhishma, they all accepted their loss. Then Amba's wish of getting her love would have been fulfilled. So Amba's decision to put herself first, Amba's angerness, that all makes sense. And it's okay to be angry when someone does injustice. It's okay to, I believe she teaches that it's okay to be angry when someone does injustice with you. It's okay to tell them that you're wrong, even though of however high post or however knowledgeable they are, because knowledgeable people also do mistakes. Now, Amba was reborn as Shikhandi because of the boon that she got, that she would be the reason behind Bhishma's death. And ultimately, in the war zone, she was the only reason behind Bhishma's death. So she fulfilled her purpose, she fulfilled what she wanted, she got revenge from Bhishma. And that was only because she prioritized herself, her wishes. And she held Bhishma wrong for his mistake, the guts or the power that nobody else had to do at that point of time. Can we move on to the next slide? Now, the last female character that I want to focus on is that of Damayanti. Damayanti is not seen in Mahabharata, not talked about at all, as far as I know. Damayanti's tale appears by a sage when he was telling this tale to Yudhishthir in his 13th year of exile, when Yudhishthir was all upset over their fate and was on the verge of tears. So, this tale is told to Yudhishthir to make him explain and understand that your problems are nothing. A similar fate was experienced by Damayanti and her husband, Nala. So this tale goes something like Damayanti and Nala were happily living, but Nala had lost all his kingdom like in the game of dice to his cousins, like Yudhishthir did. Just the difference was he did not put Damayanti at stake and he did not lose Damayanti as well. Now Nala was supposed to go and live in forest forever. He asked Damayanti to return to her father, but Damayanti denied. Damayanti chose to accompany Nala while she was pregnant. Now, when Damayanti and Nala roamed around in forest for 2 days, on the third day, when Nala and Damayanti were sleeping at night, Nala leaves Damayanti, hoping that she would go back to her father. But Damayanti, being determined, being full of love, decides not to do so. She searches for Nala in the forest. How, when accidentally or coincidentally, a messenger from Damayanti's father's kingdom appears over there, and he recognizes Damayanti and takes her back to her father. Over there, Damayanti plots a plan. How can she get Nala back? She tells the messenger to go and recite a poem everywhere, and because she was sure that only Nala could reply to this poem. That is how well she knew Nala. That is how confident she was that Nala would reply, and that happens when the messenger goes to Ayodhya. Nala replies to this poem. Nala comes back to Damayanti and tells that a ugly-looking dwarf who works as a cook in Ayodhya has replied to this poem, and she recognizes by the reply that it's Nala only. She plots a plan by declaring that uh, announce everywhere that Damayanti Swayamvar will take place in one day, and all the kings are invited. Since Nala was the fastest charioteer in the country at that point of time, King of Ayodhya chooses Nala to accompany him to the kingdom. Now, when Nala reaches over there, Damayanti recognizes Nala at once and tells everyone that he is Nala. Nala comes back to his original form, and they both together, she supports Nala in getting his revenge from his cousin. They both together again play a game of dice with the cousins, and Nala wins everything back. So the reason the tale of Damayanti was told, and what does this tale tell? This tale tells about the character traits of love, determination that okay, she wanted to be with her husband, forgiveness because she forgave her husband for leaving her all alone, putting everything at stake, and intelligence of how she could get him back, how she could call him back. Now, the reason that I told these tales, or the reason that talked about various female characters, was that their impact cannot be understood until and unless we focus on them individually and focus on their tales individually. When we look at them, they're not only associated with, as I said, character traits of a mother and a wife and a daughter, but they have many character traits like calm, poised, loving, bold, brave, determined, ambitious, intelligence, having knowledge of what's right and wrong, having knowledge of dharma, foresighted, which are mainly ignored. We've never looked at these characters with these other traits as well. We've only focused on them being ki ha. These characters, she was a good mother, she was a good wife, she was a good daughter, and that's how their character traits are seen. But when we take a look at their tales individually and separately, when we give these tales as much as importance that we are supposed to give the tales, as we give the importance to the tales of men in Mahabharata, we can understand the other character traits associated with them. Now, the impact these women characters have. The major impact these women characters have, I believe, like when I read them, they had on me, was that it's okay to have negative and positive traits both. It's okay to be imperfect because when you look at every women character, they all had positive traits, but their few mistakes, their negative traits even resulted in war to happen. They're not portrayed as a perfect character like Lord Krishna, or as a character with very little follies like Pandavas, or as a character with complete follies like Duryodhana. They're portrayed with a mixture and a balance of both. So they're portrayed in a realistic manner, unlike the men in Mahabharata. Now, this makes the women in Mahabharata way more relatable and way more understanding. Now, moving on, when I talk about the impact they have, we can say that these characters, or they teach us a very important lesson, that is how to adjust yourself depending on various situations, various circumstances that life throws in front of you. You can be calm in one situation when required, but if required, you can be full of rage and scream at people. It's normal people will give you names, it's normal people will taunt you, but they tell us to be brave and handle them as well. It's okay if you are the reason behind some problem, but it is okay if you find the solution to that problem later on. You can be the problem and the solution at the same time. And it's perfectly normal if we talk about these characters, their traits further, that it's perfectly normal if you're a very calm person, if you don't scream at all. Just one day someone misbehaves and you're in full of rage, screaming on top of your lungs and saying all the, in today's time, all these all the bad words and slangs. It's perfectly normal. It's nothing that, okay, you've done something very wrong. Like Draupadi, she was egoistic, she was full of rage, but she was even bold and calm when required. She even understood her husband when required. Similarly, being with Kunti, Kunti also committed a folly by not telling Kern earlier that you're my son, or not accepting her earlier. But later on, her motherhood arose and she went to Kern and she's like, just a day before the war, she reveals everything to him. That was a mistake. That shows the imperfection of Kunti too. Gandhari's imperfection, okay, telling your husband does not stop your husband from treating your son or pampering your son. You need to take some steps yourself. If Gandhari, maybe she would have taken few steps and told her brother Shakuni ki, leave Hastinapur, you're spoiling my son. Maybe the tale would have been different. Maybe the Duryodhan wouldn't have been like that. So all the characters have committed follies. All the characters have good traits too, and that's what makes them more understandable, reliable, and have a deeper impact on audience or on the young readers when we read them. Now, their impact mainly goes unnoticed. I am saying this from a personal experience because when I was first introduced to this text, I never took women characters in seriousness. The reason was because the tale is told in a male-centric point of view where we only focus on Kauravas and Pandavas and Krishna. We never focus on Subhadra, how she broke the practices at that point of time, or we never focus on Draupadi, or we never focus on Ganga. And I didn't even know the tale of Damayanti for a long time. She just came into notice while I was researching for this topic. I believe personally we need to change the way these characters are viewed, the way the tale is told to us. We need to alter that way. We need to give an equal importance to both the characters, men and women. If we portray men characters in the tale with such importance, we need to portray with women characters in the tales with an equal importance. Then only their impact and then only their stories will be relatable and understandable. Because we portray them under men. We portray their tales, or we tell the tales under the influence of men characters. We only knew Gandhari as a loyal wife who decided to blindfold herself for her blind husband, Dhritarashtra. We only knew Kunti as the mother of Pandavas, or Draupadi as the wife of five Pandavas. We never knew they could be egocentric at times, they could be angry, they were knowledgeable, they had knowledge of politics, warfare, and other things as well. So these characters are very important. They have a very essential impact on us. But that impact, again, I'll reiterate, can only be seen and understood if we focus on these tales and give them as equal importance as we give to the men's tales. So we have to alter the way we look at the text to understand the women characters and not marginalize them and get them unnoticed. Maybe when I talk about Mahabharata to someone, even I might come at this mistake that I do not talk about the women characters in that much detail and I just tell them the story by the 18 days war situation where two sides of the family fought. And that is the mistake that we should correct, I personally believe, because that's the only reason that is the only way we can we can correct the mistake that we've been doing for generations and ignoring the women characters. I guess I've made my point, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priyal ma'am. As you said, when we think about Mahabharata, we think about war, only the male characters like Sri Krishna, Arjun, and at maximum when we think about women, we only like the thought which comes in our mind is Draupadi. Thank you for telling us about so many women characters. Thank you so much. Now I would like to call Miss Sneha Bhattacharjee, a member of Project Kahaanikhoj, to keep her point of view. Sneha, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Mahima. First of all, happy Women's Day to all of you. Now, we would like to talk about certain women characters which were quite neglected because of other famous women characters. We grew up listening to many mythological tales which narrate the story of strong, brave male characters. But we hardly remember any strong women characters because in most of the cases they have been portrayed as either wives, mothers, or victims. Nobody pointed out the fact that they have a mind of feelings and can be strong as well, but sadly they were victims of patriarchy. For example, the Apsaras, namely Rambha, Urvashi, and other characters who were used as weapons to destroy men by distracting them by seducing them. And they have nothing to do apart from this task. Here, the theme of sexuality plays a role rather than their feelings. They lack agency over their sexuality, but they are termed as seductive women, and the patriarchy just used it for their own purpose and nothing else. Another theme is being an ideal wife is also another theme in mythology where characters like Urmila or Mandodari are there. It is difficult for a woman to wait for a husband for so many years, but no one noticed her sacrifice because of Sita. Everyone talked about Sita as being pious woman, but nobody talked about Urmila. Because staying away from her husband was really painful. 14 years is not a short time, it's a long time. But it was similar to an exile, and after Lakshman's return, she fulfilled her role as a wife. She neither complained or never she left her husband or her household for being her ideal wife. Similarly, same thing goes for Mandodari as well. She was there with Ravan, though Ravan did many mistakes in his life. He abducted Sita, he fought with Lord Rama, but still, she was there for him. Now, I would like to say something about these characters. These characters were always neglected. They never got any chance to raise their voice. Luckily, some of the Indian writers have written about them, but still, all the other major characters got the importance and the popularity rather than these characters. Thank you so much. I hope I tried to keep my point within this short time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neha. Uh, जैसे कि आपने बोला कि women are always stereotyped like ideal wife, ideal mother in these stories, and like Sita, when we talk about Sita, we only talk about that how good wife she was, but she was a very strong lady as she, अपने दोनों बेटों को उन्होंने खुद ही पाला है. Now I would like to call Megha, member of team Kahani Khoj, to keep her point of view on the topic. Megha, over to you.
थैंक यू महिमा. नारी शक्ति के बिना हर नर है अधूरा, अपने संघर्ष से करती हर काम वो पूरा. नमस्कार आप सभी को. मैं मेघा अग्रवाल, अ मेंबर ऑफ टीम प्रोजेक्ट कहानी कोश. आज का मेरा विषय है पौराणिक कथाओं में महिलाओं की भूमिका. हम सब ने वुमेन्स को लेकर एक अलग ही अपना मत बनाया है. हमने पौराणिक कथाओं में महिलाओं के बारे में विभिन्न मत सुने हैं. कोई कहता है कि महिलाओं का जो व्यक्तित्व था वो उतना विशाल नहीं था. हमने हमेशा एक मैन की भूमिका को ज्यादा देखा है, लेकिन वुमेन्स को हमने एक साइड चल रखा है. मैं आज कुछ उस पर ही अपने विचार प्रस्तुत करना चाहती हूँ. हम सभी ने हिंदू धर्म और उसके शानदार चरित्र के बारे में बचपन से सुना है. उसमें से हम कुछ सुनते सुनते बड़े होते आ गए हैं. लेकिन आज कुछ अविश्वसनीय, कुछ ऐसे व्यक्तित्व के बारे में मैं आप सभी को बताना चाहूंगी, शायद जिनके बारे पे आपने सुना भी होगा और शायद आज पहली बार सुनेंगे. हमारी संस्कृति में पौराणिक कथाओं में महिलाओं के बारे में विभिन्न मत हैं. ये महिलाएं न केवल पौराणिक कथाओं में इनका हिस्सा था, बल्कि इन्होंने धर्म की स्थापना में भी अपनी अहम भूमिका निभाई है. ये महिलाएं न सिर्फ बहादुर थी, बल्कि दृढ़ निश्चय, आत्मविश्वास, शालीनता और सुंदरता की एक मिसाल थी. इन महिलाओं में सहनशीलता, शांति, देवत्व और अन्य कई गुण विद्यमान थे. आप सभी ने द्रौपदी जी का नाम सुना है, उस पर हम चर्चा कर चुके हैं. मैम ने उसके बारे में बहुत अच्छे से बताया है. लेकिन एक चीज मैं आप सभी से पूछना चाहूंगी कि द्रौपदी जी का नाम सुनते ही आप सभी के दिमाग में सबसे पहले क्या आता है? आप सभी के दिमाग में एक ही दृश्य आता होगा, जहां तक मुझे उम्मीद है, उनका जो वस्त्र हरण हुआ था. लेकिन अब मैं आप सभी से कहना चाहूंगी कि उस दृश्य को एक साइड रखकर उस दृश्य को देखने की कोशिश करिए जो उनका खुद का एक व्यक्तित्व था. द्रौपदी जी के बारे में हमने एक अपनी धारणा बना ली थी कि वो एक ऐसी महिला है जिन्होंने उस उस अ, उस घटना को फेस किया है जो बहुत गलत हुआ है, जो नहीं होना चाहिए था. लेकिन हमें उस व्यक्तित्व पर भी ध्यान देने की आवश्यकता है जो वो रियल में भी थी. हम जानते हैं कि उनके साथ जो हुआ वो ठीक नहीं हुआ, लेकिन वो एक ऐसी महिला थी तो जानती थी कि अपने जो अपने दुश्मन है या अपने विरोधी हैं उनके प्रति कैसी रणनीति अपनानी चाहिए, इसलिए वो कभी असफल नहीं हुई। वो एक वीर, शौर्य और एक बहादुर महिला की मिसाल है। ऐसे ही अनगिनत महिलाएं हैं जिन पर हम ऑलरेडी चर्चा कर चुके हैं, जिनके बारे में मैं डिटेल में नहीं जाना चाहूंगी। मैं बस इतना ही कहना चाहूंगी कि महिला और पुरुष दोनों समान हैं। बात प्राचीन समय की हो या वर्तमान समय की, हमें सिर्फ एक चीज की आवश्यकता है, वो है अपना दृष्टिकोण बदलने की। बचपन से लेकर आज तक हम बदल रहे हैं, हमारा व्यक्तित्व बदल रहा है, लेकिन एक चीज कहीं ना कहीं आज भी पीछे है, वो है हमारी सोच। हम कहीं ना कहीं आज भी प्राचीन समय की सोच से प्रभावित हैं, जो हमें बदलने की आवश्यकता है। हम बात करते हैं अब भारतीय साहित्य की, इंडियन लिटरेचर की, जहाँ वुमेन्स ने एक अहम रोल निभाया है। महाभारत की बात हो चाहे रामायण की, महिलाओं की एक अहम भूमिका हमेशा रही है। यहाँ मैं कोई स्टीरियोटाइप बात नहीं करना चाहूंगी कि क्योंकि मैं भी एक गर्ल्स हूँ कि मैं वुमन की तरफ ज्यादा पक्ष रखूंगी, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। क्योंकि वुमेन्स की अपनी एक अहम भूमिका है, उसको हम नकार नहीं सकते। बात करें इंडियन लिटरेचर की, तो वुमेन्स ने अपने अलग अलग तरीकों से अपनी एक अलग पहचान बनाई है। हम हमेशा ये कहते हैं कि महिलाएं कमजोर होती हैं। मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगी कि महिलाएं कमजोर नहीं हैं। कमजोर है तो हमारी दृष्टि, कमजोर है तो हमारे सोचने का तरीका, हमारे देखने का नजरिया। हम इस दृष्टि को बदल सकते हैं और हम न सिर्फ महिलाओं को आगे लेके जा सकते हैं, बल्कि पुरुष भी महिलाओं के साथ तरक्की कर सकते हैं। हम कहते हैं कि महिलाओं को पुरुष के साथ तरक्की करने की आवश्यकता है। मैं कहती हूँ कि पुरुष महिलाओं के साथ तरक्की कर सकते हैं, सिर्फ अपनी सोच बदलकर। क्योंकि प्राचीन काल से लेकर वर्तमान तक महिलाओं ने अपनी एक अहम भूमिका अदा की है और उनके रोल को कोई भी नकार नहीं सकता। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सो मच मीठा। जैसे आपने स्टार्टिंग में बोला कि हम जब भी रामायण या महाभारत या किसी भी स्टोरी की बात करते हैं तो हम वुमेन को हमेशा साइड कैरेक्टर के उसमें ही देखते हैं, चाहे वो रामायण की सीता हो, उर्मिला हो या फिर महाभारत की द्रौपदी हो। एक ही याद रहता है कि उनका जो सिर हरण हुआ था। लेकिन हमें अपने सोच को बदलने की ज़रूरत है, अपने नज़रिए को बदलने की ज़रूरत है। जैसे कि आपने कहा कि पुरुष भी महिलाओं के साथ आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। Now, I would like to call Ms. Ridham Mehra, member of Project कहानी खोज, अपने विचार प्रस्तुत करने के लिए। रिदम, over to you.
नमस्ते, मैं रिदम मेहरा हूँ, प्रोजेक्ट कहानी खोज की सदस्य। आप सबको महिला दिवस का मैं आपको पूर्व से अभिनंदन देती हूँ। एंड एक विमेन होने से, एक लड़की होने से
Rhythm, you are not properly audible. Your voice is too low.
am I audible now?
Yes.
मैं रिदम मेहरा प्रोजेक्ट कहानी खोज की सदस्य हूँ और आप सबका महिला दिवस का पूर्व से अभिनंदन आपको देती हूँ और एक महिला होने से गर्व करती हूँ। पहले तो मेरा विषय आज जो है वो महाभारत की एक एक्टर है जिनका नाम था हिडिंबा। आप सबने उनका नाम तो सुना ही होगा। अब महाभारत में उनका ज्यादा बड़ा भाग नहीं था, लेकिन छोटा भाग होते हुए भी बहुत विशेष था। हिडिंबा की कहानी बहुत प्रेरणादायक है आज की कई महिलाओं के लिए। वह एक राक्षसी योनि में जन्मी हुई राक्षस हिडिंबा की बहन थी। वह भीम से पांडवों के 14 साल के वनवास के दौरान मिली थी और उन्हें वो देखते ही वो भाग गई थी। वो उनके प्रेम में पड़ गई थी। इस वजह से उन्होंने किसी का भय न पाते हुए सबसे पहले माता कुंती के सामने उनका भीम के साथ विवाह का प्रस्ताव रखा। ये तो जैसा है भीम के साथ विवाह होने के थोड़े वक्त के पश्चात ही उनका एक पुत्र हुआ जिनका नाम था घटोत्कच। अब दरअसल जब उनका विवाह हो रहा था तो भीम ने उनके सामने एक शर्त रखी थी कि वह उनको अपने साथ अपने राष्ट्र में नहीं ले जा सकते, क्योंकि उस वक्त राक्षसों का राजभवन में जाना या वहां पे होना निषेध था। तो इस वजह से वो उनको अपने साथ पांचाल नहीं ले जा सके। उस वक्त ये हुआ कि जब भीम ने उनको जब उनका भीम के साथ पुत्र हुआ थोड़े ही वर्ष के बाद, तो उन्होंने ओके घटोत्कच के जन्म के बाद ही भीम उन्हें छोड़कर चले गए जैसा तय हुआ था। जब भीम छोड़कर गए तब वह उनको छोड़कर जाना नहीं चाहते थे क्योंकि वह उस चीज से हिचकिचा रहे थे। लेकिन हिडिंबा ने कहा कि वह अपना और अपने पुत्र का रक्षण और ध्यान रखने में सक्षम है। वह ऐसा इसलिए किए करी थी क्योंकि वह जानती थी कि उनके पति का अपने राज्य और अपने भाइयों के प्रति कोई कर्तव्य है जिन्हें उन्हें पूरा करना होगा। पांडु राष्ट्र में सबसे पहली कुल वधु होते हुए भी उन्हें उस चीज का सम्मान कभी नहीं मिला। पर उनके मन में कभी इस चीज को लेकर ईर्ष्या या क्रोध जैसी भावनाएं पैदा नहीं हुई। उल्टा वो तो हमेशा अपने पुत्र को यह शिक्षा देती थी कि वह अपने अपने पिता और अपने भाई उनके भाइयों का सम्मान करे। इसके अलावा एक राक्षस योनि में जन्म होने के बाद भी उन्होंने अपने पुत्र को बहुत अच्छे व्यक्तित्व में बड़ा किया। वो एक आज के वक्त के लिए नारियों के लिए एक बलिदान, संघर्ष, सच्चे प्रेम, निडरता और साहस के पूर्णतः उदाहरण है। धन्यवाद। ऑल्सो वन थिंग मैं आपको सबको बताना चाहूँगी कि मेरे को पर्सनली हिडिंबा की कहानी बहुत इंस्पिरेशनल इस वजह से भी लगती है क्योंकि ये इनसे बहुत कुछ आज महिलाएं सीख सकती हैं। उन्होंने वो एक सिंगल मदर थी जिन्होंने उस वक्त में अपने बच्चे को अकेले बड़ा किया था। जिंदगी भर अपने पति और अपने ससुराल का अनुभव ना लेते हुए भी उन्होंने कभी अपने अंदर एक गंदी भावना या किसी गलत तरीके की भावना नहीं आई। तो इसलिए वो मेरे लिए पर्सनल इंस्पिरेशन है। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू रिदम। आपने तो बिल्कुल एक ऐसे कैरेक्टर के बारे में बात की हिडिंबा के बारे में जो मतलब मैंने बिल्कुल सोचा ही नहीं था। हिडिंबा को देवी हिडिंबा के उससे पूजा भी जाता है एंड शी वॉज अ वेरी ब्रेव वुमन जैसे कि आपने कहा। और सिर्फ स्टीरियोटाइप एज अ मदर नहीं करना चाहिए बट शी वॉज ऑल्सो अ सिंगल मदर। और घटोत्कच तो हम सब जानते हैं कि वो कितने ब्रेव थे, तो जरूर उनकी परवरिश ही ऐसी थी। Um, Now, I would like to say that women in today's generation are different from the women in 20th century. Today, women are earning and taking care of themselves rather than depending on men. Women today are growing with flying colors and achieving everything they want. And I am so proud to be a woman of 21st century. Now I would like to call Chahat Chopra, team lead of Project Kahaanikhoj. Coach, Chahat, over to you.
Thank you, Mahima. I'm really glad today to express my gratitude to all of you. Firstly, thank you all for sparing your precious time for coming here and sharing your views today. Special thanks to all our speakers, Miss Priyal Navlani, Sneha, Megha, and Rhythm. Thank you all for coming today and expressing your views over the topic. It was my pleasure to hear you all on the spot. I would like to present my gratitude towards my anchor, Miss Mahima. Thank you, Mahima, for taking this event very greatly. And lastly, to all the audience who are watching this right now on YouTube Live, thank you all. Special thank to all the members of Project Kahani Kosh and Kahani Coach for working together. Thank you, everyone.